Welcome to Live with Marketers, our talk show where we talk shop with bright minds on marketing topics. I'm Ty Heath, Director of Market Engagement at our LinkedIn B2B Institute think tank, where we explore how marketing can create more value. Today's episode is about equity every day. We know diversity, equity, and inclusion is good business. The case has been made time and time again. We know that DEI leads to great results. If we know this to be true, then why don't we always see the action we would expect from leaders who accept those findings? So that's what we're going to explore today because we're interested in how we make progress. We want to create a future where equity every day is a reality. So, with help from marketing and behavioral science, let's examine what's stopping us from making progress and how can marketing and communications make a difference. So, before we get into that, introduce our amazing guests for today, just a few housekeeping items for everyone. So, the first thing, as always, the recording will be available after the broadcast. So, be sure to check that out. We want to hear from you throughout the broadcast. So, if you have any comments, questions, all of those things, let us know in the chat. And if you're following along on social, you can use hashtag live with marketers. And then finally, we want to know if we've created value for you today. So at the very end, we'll also be doing a survey. Be sure to let us know how you felt about today's broadcast. All right. So with that, with no further ado, let's actually bring in our speakers. So welcome. Hello.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Happy to be here.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm very excited for this conversation, and I want to have the audience get to know each of you. All of you do amazing work. So this is also an opportunity for me to brag on you a little bit, share, let the audience know a little bit more about the fabulousness that is here with us today. So why don't we start with you, Jamila? So we've been friends for a while, and also I've been following your research for a long time, especially given my passion on this topic. And so in particular, I remember reading your work on the principal practice gap and thinking, yes, like this is so key. And so just so the audience knows all of those things, and we'll get into the principal practice gap, I want them to know you have a JD from Stanford, a PhD in sociology from Stanford, so law school, and a PhD in sociology. Your research focuses on contemporary bias, effectiveness of anti-discrimination law, and the capacity of law to promote compliance and social change. So essentially all the things that we need to dive into today. So there's so much goodness there. Tell us what inspired you to take the path you took and do the research that you do on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Oh, sure. Okay, sure. First of all, hi, everyone, and thanks, Ty, and thanks, everyone here for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, part of this conversation. Wow. So honestly, I'm just troubled like many by all of the inequalities that we see that have been around for so long. We're not seeing the shifts that we might expect to see. We're seeing some change, but some things just seem so persistent. So there's a huge divide between the haves and the have-nots. And a lot of that really does line up with where you're born, what family you're born into, what race you are, your gender. So really, too many people are still hurting from racism and sexism. We haven't quite acknowledged fully the toll that this takes on people. I was just talking to my mom the other day, actually, and, we're just talking about making it through challenging times in life. And she was going back and told me a story about when I was just a very young girl, and she was just having these bad experiences at work with this particular supervisor who just didn't want to promote her. She knew she was most qualified. She knew she was next in line. It was crystal clear, but she just was overlooked like everyone else who was a person of color. She just ended up being looked over. It was another white male like all of the other managers. And she was just explaining how she lost weight and she was throwing up and like just having to go back in that toxic environment. And eventually she just quit. She said, I'll start a daycare up and I'll go home with my baby girl and get a couple other kids. And this is a woman with a PhD as well, who's gone on and to do great things. But that was actually the first time I heard that story. And it just made me realize how important it is to be doing this work because those things have not gone away. A lot of people are still having those experiences. So I was just looking as well at a book, a forthcoming book by Frank Dobbin and Alexandra Caleb. They're sociologists. And you're no more likely to be a manager if you're a Black man today than your grandfather was 40 years ago. Okay, so really my question is, why do we have all these laws and DEI programs, but still there are a lot of things we'd want to see still change? So that's part of what brought me to doing this research and keeps me going in this area of scholarship.
We're going to get into it today. I'm so glad. And I think often all of us are motivated by the things we see out in the world, the things that impact our lives. And it's so great to see the devotion and the effort made and we're going to shine a light on this today. Thank you so much for introducing yourself. So Christina, we're going to move to you now. So as Chief Marketing Officer and Engagement Officer at Salesforce.org, you're an intentional storyteller. Yes. So you've been named to Ebony Magazine's top Power 100 list. So this is a list of change agents, thought leaders, and captains of industry. You have a Make Change events program at Salesforce that creates a platform for leaders who use their businesses to create change. So a lot of really amazing work there. What inspires you to do the work, and what opportunities do you see for other CMOs to take on by investing in this way?
I agree with everything that Jamila said, but I'm also going to take a slight pivot. And I guess I'm frustrated that we're even still having this conversation as it relates to marketing and engagement. If you're a content creator, you're a culture creator. You've heard me say that many times. And if you're trying to reach the broadest audience, why are you parking your multicultural marketing in a corner and not funding it? To me, when you think about multicultural marketing as something separate from marketing, I think of how antiquated you sound. It's no different than saying, e-commerce. E-commerce is commerce. Digital marketing is marketing. Multicultural marketing is simply marketing. If you're not marketing to the broadest audience out there, what are you doing? When you think about the agencies that you want to work with, the Make Change program that I'm really proud of was developed in partnership with Anthemic. I work with a marketing agency called Buckshot Marketing. They're a cultural marketing company. Again, I'm talking about culture. I'm not talking about marketing just to Black people. I'm talking about marketing to all people. But let me pause for a second. If you're thinking about, is there money in the Black community? Yes. I checked in with the master of these statistics, Andrew McCaskill, before I got on this call, because the numbers just keep going up, right? We will contribute 1.5 trillion to the economy annually. And because we're a younger consumer, we have more time as a customer buyer to earn our loyalty. Is that real? And so with that, I give back to you, Beyonce, Fenty and Rihanna, Rich Paul. Don't you want to have those types of audiences? They're not just marketing to Black people, they're marketing to all people. And so I just would like for people, when they're considering their go-to-market strategy, be intentional and consider that there's also more people in leadership, even if you're not just in direct-to-consumer, that are buying enterprise products. So consider how you look when you come to a meeting and no one looks like anyone other than yourself. I will get off my soapbox, but I feel very strongly about this topic, enough to come on my birthday to do a panel.
Yes, and we are so appreciative. Yes, thank you so much. And we're going to have you stay on that soapbox. So we will come back to you and we will be talking more. But yes, multicultural marketing is marketing, and reaching audiences, all audiences, is essential. So now, John, I want to come to you and have everyone get to know you. So you're Chief Marketing Officer at System One, and we've done some great work together in the realm of analyzing B2B marketing creative and determining what's effective to support marketers. So you've recently done some research in partnership with ITV and DECA. So they're diversity media specialists. The report is called Feeling Seen, and it examines the importance of diversity and inclusion in advertising and our role to understand the needs of that audience. So what inspires you on the topic, and what inspired your team to take on the particular project you took on?
Hi. So firstly, thank you so much for having us on, and thank you to everybody as well. Listen, there were two things that happened last year in the UK. As you can hear, I'm from the UK, not the US. But there were two big events that happened last year that really affected me personally, actually. So the first one, there's a very famous dance group in the UK called Diversity, actually, that won Britain's Got Talent. I think in America, you might have America's Got Talent as well. It's the biggest TV show. It's watched by millions. They're hugely successful. And last year, they did a Black Lives Matter inspired dance, and it attracted the biggest number of complaints of any program last year. And it was really disturbing to see that. And ITV stood firm, and they were really amazing, actually. And they put a big advert out in lots of newspapers. And it just said this. It said, we are changed by what we see, just as we are changed when we are seen. And it was such a profound realization that, and it was such a strong statement. And they went out and they said, we stand with diversity. And it was a really big statement. And then later in the year, something else happened also actually on ITV, which was a big supermarket chain in the UK called Sainsbury's had two Christmas ads. One Christmas ad had a black family in, and the other Christmas ad had a white family in. And the one with the black family, again, triggered a lot of complaints. And there was a big social media storm, and ITV had to deal with the backlash. Now, what they did next was quite amazing. They got together with every other TV station, and they aired the ad consistently across every channel, including all their competitors, and every other supermarket paid for and sponsored the ad break with Sainsbury's to say, and we stand with Sainsbury's. And it was incredible. It was absolutely amazing. So given my job as testing advertising, what I also found happening, and I think this is really important to our conversation, is I was talking to CMOs who are making advertising who were slightly worried about what was happening, going, can I still put that advert on air? Am I going to get a backlash? How do I get this right to stop all this happening? Now, the fear was well-intentioned. They were trying to do the right thing, but they were nervous. So what I do is I test advertising before it goes on air. And what we found in the Sainsbury's case, right, the black family ad did a whole lot better than the white family. And actually, it did really well in our research, because actually it was seen as refreshing. It was surprising in a good way. And so what I wanted to do was prove to everybody the commercial case for diversity and inclusion in advertising. And what I was able to do by we talked to 10,000 people in the UK. We tested it through our methodology, which predicts how well it does. And we proved the case that diversity in advertising is not just right for society, but it's actually good for business. And then the second thing I wanted to do was I really wanted to show people great advertising that changes culture, that shapes society and does it well, because there's no excuse for not doing it, because the evidence is there. The best practice is there, and I can show you this. Sorry, I'm joining Christine on a soapbox now. Sorry, but we wrote this book to show people what it looks like, so that everybody can see it, experience it, and they can, for free. We're not going to charge anyone for this, but you can go out and make it yourself. So we just wanted to prove that. And just finally to say, I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but we're now doing the same bit of research in the US, because you guys have got even bigger, more culture, more people. There's more going on, and so we're taking the same approach and trying to see what we can do in the US as well.
Absolutely, and hope we can get a little preview of those results, what you're starting to see. Absolutely, and folks, please ask questions throughout, because we are going to get into it. But if you have any questions along the way, what tactics? What did John do? What's Christina's experience? What does Jamila's research say? Feel free to bring those comments, and also let us know, what does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to you? What brought you to this broadcast today? We want to hear from you. So let us know those things. All right, so let's kick things off by making sure that we are all on the same page about what we're talking about today when we say the business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So Jamila, I'm going to come to you for this first question to help us define and kick off the conversation with, help us understand what people typically mean when they talk about the business case, and then how do you also define it in your research? Earlier, when you introduced yourself, you mentioned some of the things that we're still dealing with. And so I hope you can also share, what's the evidence that the business case is not working the way we would expect it to?
Okay, sure. Well, yeah. Well, the fact that we're still at the same place we were decades ago in many arenas is one sign of evidence that it's not working. The business case is the primary messaging, framing, rationale for why we need diversity in organizations, why we need to hire women and people of color in the workplace, other historically excluded groups. And when Christina was talking about the business case and the buying power, I was like, yeah, this is one of those situations where, yes, it's a powerful case, but there are ways it can just go wrong and go astray and not lead to the outcomes we might hope that it leads to. So just to put us on the same page, the business case for years, equity professionals and academics, business leaders have been saying that diversity makes good business sense. Okay, so there's tangible rewards, like you get to tap into that market, right, that Christina's talking about, that come with diversity. They can help you serve those communities, maybe other communities more broadly with that culture that they bring. All right, so this has been used more as a rationale why we need to shake it up and change the status quo and change what our workplace demographics are and promote these people to your leadership ranks as well. That's been coming along more recently. So we've been talking about this more as of late as the transactional case. Okay, so the business case is more of a transactional approach because it focuses on business outcomes to justify the DEI investment. And so it's about this rational exchange. You're going to get more innovation. All right, you're going to get broader viewpoints for decisions. I think we have an infographic about this as well that can help. You'll better be able to serve your clients or your customers, your market. All right, so that's pretty straightforward. We've all heard this. It all goes back to the bottom line and the increase in profits that you get from these identities. So the issue, though, is that although many of us know that there is a business case, it doesn't seem to be as persuasive as we may think. I've heard you say it before. If there's a business case and if diversity is profitable, why aren't people buying? Why haven't we seen the changes in leadership and the changes in some of these job categories as we may expect? All right, so here just were some examples, the decision making and those types of things, innovation. What I found in my research about some of what Christina mentioned is that sometimes then that talent coming in can be pigeonholed, right, in jobs that are not as valued. Do this diversity job for us, or do this recruiting job, or do this multicultural marketing that's only for this one segment, not for everyone. So it really limits your ability to grow and thrive and serve across business lines and many types of jobs if you're thought to be being brought in to bring that one type of benefit. Okay, so that's part of the issue. Also, it can lead to cognitive dissonance as well, because people may think, we don't need a woman for this type of job, or we know this business well, or, we don't see how that viewpoint is better than our viewpoint. So then it leads to some tension that can then lead the Black person, the Latina person, and the other people who haven't been previously excluded. They face a higher degree of scrutiny. People are looking for, where's the return on my investment for including them and bringing them in. So it's less about changing the culture and creating a place where they can thrive, and more about whether they're bringing a return that this business case kind of lays out for leaders to expect. So that's just the basics of what the arguments are and the approach is about.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. And it's really framed as like the business outcome case, that when you invest, it's going to generate some sort of outcome. The other thing I wanted to bring up, Jamila, you talk about one of the key hindrances being this thing called the principal practice gap. That's actually, when I was looking at your research, I was like, that is so key. And there's a gap. Can you tell us a little bit more about the gap and what we can start to use to define it?
Sure. Yeah, so the principal practice gap is just the fact that if you go out and talk to people, many people say that they value diversity. Many people say that they value diversity. They believe in equity. They see the benefits of it. So people will even state this business case, but then when you look for the action, are they taking concrete steps and actions to actually change what the workplace looks like, or to break down those systems that can create barriers for people? You don't see that action coming. So there's a disconnect there. Okay, so the actions and the statements can be inconsistent. We see this a lot right now. We're in this age of social justice, right? So after George Floyd was murdered by the police in the streets, a lot of people were thinking about inequality and thinking about equity, thinking about DEI, saying that they're committed and pledging to change. All right, so we see maybe 80% of people saying that diversity is important and beneficial. But in my research, I find that out of those people who say diversity is important, only about 30% of them are willing to act, to actually hire or promote a Black candidate, give them that top bonus, expose them to the top clients. And those are the things that are actually going to lead to real change, right? And actual cultural shifts and shifts the system. So the question is, when do those beliefs and the knowledge about diversity and equity being important, when do those actually lead to the action? And we need to think about what's necessary to shrink that gap to where we see more action and more things that will lead to more meaningful change in the long run.
Absolutely. And that's why we wanted to host this conversation, because I think all of us can agree that marketers, given the media, given the ads, all of the messages that we're responsible for, that we can perhaps help to move the needle to help close this gap that you're talking about. And so, Christina, this is where I want to come to you, because marketers have really made a commitment to taking this on in a significant way. So America's biggest public companies and foundations committed $49.5 billion to address racial inequality. And so that's an unprecedented investment. And it's been described in this framework of social justice reckoning and the response to it. So it's really encouraging. And I'm just wondering, so given all of this investment, we do want to make sure that it lands and it moves things. What are some of the things in your experience that prevent people and organizations from actually following through on those commitments?
I love this question, and I'm going to double down on what Jamila said as well. And I'm going to reflect back on what John said earlier, which was, in this time, a lot of companies wanted to post their Black Lives Matter, a social card, or say, we stand with, Black lives. But when you looked at what they actually stood for, there wasn't a lot behind it. But fortunately, I work at Salesforce. And again, you may remember during the aftermath of George Floyd's murder in the summer of 2020, there was a social media darkout called Blackout Tuesday. Ebony Freelix and I had already decided, Ebony is our Chief Philanthropy Officer here at Salesforce, also another incredible Black woman that I have the honor of partnering with. We wanted to do something, and we have an incredible CEO in Mark Benioff, and I was feeling lost. I wanted to say something, do something, use the only thing that I know how to use, which is storytelling, to create a platform for conversation about what needed to change. And so we produced a Leading Through Change episode that was scheduled for that Tuesday, and it was featuring Ebony, Mark, journalist Soledad O'Brien, Melody Hobson, and it's Salesforce, and of course it's me, so also LL Cool J and Stevie Wonder. We were going to talk about what needed to change, and we were going to use our program, again, Leading Through Change, which, like Make Change, focuses on leaders who use their platform to drive change. The social media team were worried about posting content on Blackout Tuesday, but because, again, I look at the world through an inclusive lens, and I understood what Blackout Tuesday was for. It was for educating, it's for teaching. We ended up going live, and it was one of my proudest moments at this company. The conversation was too important not to say something, and going silent simply wasn't an option for me. And this is how Salesforce demonstrated follow through. You hear me talk a lot about action leadership versus thought leadership, and my friend Ebony is the poster child for that. Instead of just having that moment and walking away, Ebony formed a task force at Salesforce, the racial equality and justice efforts. And of course, no company is perfect, but to me, this is a concrete model of how organizations can move from thought leadership to action leadership. We measure and track 4 specific metrics here. It's around people. We made a commitment to double US representation of Black leaders. Again, to Jamila's point, if there's not enough of us in seat, we can't drive change. Philanthropy, of course. a commitment to invest $200 million and $1 million in dollars and 1 million volunteer hours in racial equity and justice over the next 5 years. And purchasing, right? We need to make sure that we are purchasing our Black-owned businesses. Again, Buckshot Marketing is a great example. She's a Black woman running a Black-owned business, but I go to her not to target Black people. I work with Christina to target culture. I want to go after culturally relevant moments. And with that, we have also focused on policy, because we know that policy is an essential force for systemic change. And so we advocate for police reform, civic engagement, and economic empowerment and policies. You need all of these things together to come together. You can't just talk about things. You can't post things without doing things. Mm-hmm. And, we need to have people in seats with the power to drive these change, to make that change, to make these hiring decisions, and to look at the world through a different lens. The only way that we get to the other side of this is truly together.
Absolutely. I'm going to take that phrase, action leadership versus thought leadership. I really like that. And it's great to hear the commitment, the investment, and how you show up. There are also some folks in the chat sharing what makes them invest and why this is important to them. So I just want to share a little bit there. Folks have said, this is part of my role. It's about human rights and equality. It's about new ideas and experiences. It's about creating a stronger company and culture, meaningful change, building a better future. Natalie, shout out to you. I'm here as the founder and president of Black Marketers Association of America, always looking for ways to learn more to help create more equitable spaces. I live this inclusivity and representation. So a lot of positive energy and action orientation on this broadcast today. So thank you so much, everyone. Keep sharing, keep asking questions. And so now, John, I want to come to you with this next question, because again, in the research, you're seeing how marketers, again, have taken on these social issues and how we're starting to evolve the way people are represented in marketing. So we're really curious, what were some of the most surprising takeaways from the Feeling Seen research? Can you provide maybe some examples of things that didn't work so well, without naming names, and then some things that worked well with audiences when it came to doing this work?
Yeah, definitely can. So let me just firstly really super briefly explain Feeling Seen, how we did it. And in fact, we've just got the results back from the US study. So this is breaking news. You're hearing it first as well. So in the US, we've tested 55 diverse ads. We've spoken to 22,500 people across every different group within society, right? So we've got a really good picture of how advertising works. Now, what we do at System One is we ask people how they feel, because how you feel actually predicts what you're going to go on and do, right? So the happier you feel about advertising, the more likely you are to go on and buy the product or act or do something different. And, as we've been talking about already, we in advertising contribute to shaping society. And we can choose whether we brutalize that society or whether we lift that society up to a higher place. So it's really important that we get this right. So let me just give you the statistics quickly, because I think this will give you the commercial case. I know we've already talked about it, but it's quite amazing when you actually look at it. So we rate advertising on a five-star scale. A 1-star advert means it has no impact at all, right? So we don't see any evidence that people go and do anything differently. A 5-star ad is in the top 1% of ads. That's where advertising has a big impact, and we see a 3% market share gain in the category for that brand, right? Now, the average star rating of all ads that we've tested, and we test every ad in the US, we've done it for 4 or 5 years now, the average star is just over 2.1. Now, when we tested our 55 diverse ads, and we tested them with the audience who are represented, so if it was African-American, we tested it with African-American audience, and so on, the star rating goes up to 4, right? Now, 4 puts it in the top probably 5 or 6% of all ads on the database. But let me tell you about the money, right? That's the equivalent of a 2% market share gain for that company in total. Now, that is millions and millions of dollars, right? That is a huge return on investment. So the average was 4. Now, here's the also good news. So what we say in the report is Feeling Seen feels good. When people see themselves in advertising, see their culture reflected, they feel happier and they feel that more strongly, which is great. Now, but there's another benefit. The general population in the US seeing the diverse ads scored a 3.8, almost as good as the audience represented. Now, that is incredible, right? Now, one caveat is you might go, well, John, look, you've just picked some good advertisers, right? I mean, we had Nike, we had Adidas, we had LinkedIn, of course, you know, because we love you guys and you're doing brilliant work. We had Microsoft, and genuinely you do, right? We had Apple in there. I mean, Samsung, the great and the good were in there. But listen, I did this one thing. I went and looked back at the average score of those ads in those companies in total. The diverse ads were 1.4 star better than their averages. So even for companies that already do good advertising, when they do diversity inclusion well, they're getting a big uplift, which is equivalent of a 1% market share gain. So very quickly, that's the commercial case. So there is no excuse for any marketer who cares about doing good work not to do this, right? So first thing, that's the first thing you need to hear, right? Surprises. So I love surprises. So let me tell you the surprises. The first thing, and this might not be a surprise, and I'm probably going to tell you what you know, so apologies, but the thing that struck me was how intensely people feel when they see themselves in advertising. It was quite astonishing. And the uplift in the intensity of emotion. So look, people felt happy, but if, let's say, as a Black woman, you see yourself in advertising, that intensity of emotion is a whole degree higher. And the reason intensity is important is that if you feel strongly about something, you know what, you're going to do something, aren't you? You're more likely to talk to a friend, you're more likely to buy it and so on. So the intensity was a big surprise. The second surprise, and I have to admit this as well, was stereotypes were quite interesting because, you know, and I had quite a diverse panel of people choosing the adverts we tested. Some of the ads that we thought were very stereotypical, for example, there was an Asian ad of a famous curry sauce in the UK. And we looked at the ad and we thought, oh, that's a bit stereotypical. It looks like it's 30 years old. And we laughed about it, right, when we were choosing the ad. It was the best performing ad in the entire test, right? Because you know what? Asian people said, at last, we've seen our culture. This is what we've grown up with. We love this. This is what, you know, makes us feel great about family tradition, gathering, all that kind of thing. So it taught me you need to leave your stereotypes and your preconceived ideas at the door, and you need to talk to the people that are represented and understand what they think. So that was a really useful surprise. The other thing that was quite a surprise as well is the power of every day, because actually what we found was the advertising that did really well was actually often reflected people's everyday. It wasn't the celebrity advertising. It wasn't necessarily the really spiky, disruptive kind of challenging things. Actually, people seeing everyday things reflected and their everyday experiences was very welcome. And it actually resonated with people much more strongly than the kind of celebrity, the kind of, or the provocative and the campaigning ones at the other side. So again, there were lots of surprises, but let me tell you what makes advertising good, right? So what makes advertising good is brilliant storytelling. And I loved hearing, Christina, you just talking about it there, because it's the number one thing. Please, please, please tell good stories, authentically told with character that are real, right? And that's those stories that it does not matter who you are, where you come from. If you tell the story well, tell one person's story brilliantly, and everyone will come with you, right? But try and tell an entire group story badly, and everyone will reject it, right? So what we found is lots of advertisers try and go, we're going to show everybody, we're going to try and represent this entire group of people. And those kind of adverts typically didn't appeal to anybody. So you're much better off trying to tell one story powerfully and really stand for something than try and tell lots of things badly. So they were some of our kind of conclusions that came out.
That's great. Stand for something. Tell a story. Leave what you think might be the result at the door, and know the audience that you're creating the story with. That's really amazing. So we're talking about some very human things, and I want to tap into that a little bit more with a question for you, Jamila, and also for the audience. Please continue to share questions if you have them. We will have a live Q&A at the end, and we'll be able to get to those questions. So we've just heard some very human things between the work that Christina's done and the research that John's done, Jamila. And so what we know to be true inside of that humanity that we can't separate is biases. So we know that biases play a role in preventing people from taking action, even when they say it's important. That's that principal practice gap that you talked about in your research. So out of curiosity, what is the impact of bias on our ability to make progress? And then also there's a phenomenon you talk about in your research called the colorblind conundrum. I would love for you to illuminate that as well.
Sure. So this is so complex. This is like books and articles on this, but let me try to sum it up for you. And I'm glad you asked about one example. So really, there are many types of biases that can be triggered. And particularly, I want to kind of stick with this different type of messaging around diversity and DEI. And some we may think are compelling to us, but we have to acknowledge the type of bias that it triggers that could be counterproductive to what we're trying to accomplish. So I talk about things like loss aversion that can be triggered, or cognitive dissonance that can be triggered, or zero-sum thinking. Colorblind conundrum. So these are things that certain type of DEI messaging and approaches can lead to, these that actually make decision makers even less likely to include that underrepresented talent. So this is something that it doesn't make you not go out and spread the word and do what you have to do, but you just want to be aware of it. The colorblind conundrum basically is the message we hear a lot that, we don't see color. This isn't about color. And I really, in my research, I build on work by sociologist Eduardo Bonilla Silva. He has a book called Racism Without Racists, where he talks about this, where these are people who are seemingly progressive in other ways, but there is a justification for their inaction. So the reason why they don't, promote a Black person or hire another person of color or put a woman on the leadership team, there's always a reasoning behind it. And it's not because of color, but it's usually built into merit, qualifications, needing the best person for the job. And it goes back to being colorblind, which sounds very rational. So it's hard to question that. Well, they're saying it's merit-based, they're saying it's about qualifications, but then if you look a little closer, that shifts. Okay, so it kind of seems to be a moving target that then, the Black or brown person is always coming up a little bit shorter, maybe the next one, this one's missing this, but then it's different from when it's a white person, for example, being considered. They might have a slightly different standard. So these are just things to just keep in mind. Colorblind conundrum is one that can get in the way of action and can be used to justify an action in ways that sound very rational. And going back to the business case, this is part of why I think the business case can be problematic, because it gets into this rational fight of who's the most qualified, who has the greatest merit, who is going to bring the most returns. Okay, so then it's like, okay, once you then bring in the person of color, then they're saying, but it didn't increase our growth rate any more than our growth rate already was, or it did increase it in this group, but not in this group. So we don't need any more in this group, or we won't do that again in this group because we aren't seeing that performance bump or that ROI. So really it makes equity about something that I believe personally that it shouldn't be about. So that's just the colorblind conundrum, and then other types of rational arguments and how those rational arguments can be used to justify continuing racist systems and behaviors.
Yeah, that is important for everyone to understand, that these things are standing in the way, often operating in the background, often unintentional. And they're things that all humans deal with. And so how do we start to overcome those things? How do we make the case in a way that actually resonates and lands and has people overcome those biases or mitigate them? So Jamila, you and I've talked about this concept of moving from the transactional case or the business case to the transformational case. Also, I want to give a shout out to Aiko Bethia from Rare Consulting. I first learned about her work on Brene Brown's podcast. So folks, check out the episode with Aiko Bethia and Brene Brown. She talks about transactional versus transformational. And the way she talks about it is that the transformational case is more likely to win people's hearts and minds and drive meaningful change. So, Jamila, if you could share a little bit about what the transformational case looks like, how is it distinct, and how does it perhaps mitigate the biases that you just mentioned?
Yeah. So this really, honestly, I really enjoyed hearing what Christina just talked about with the storytelling, and John as well with, how you feel predicts what you do, because really it ties back to that. That's more of what a transformational approach is, as well as how whether you feel that you belong or not. If you're constantly proving your worth based on how much improvement to the bottom line your identity is creating, it's a little dehumanizing. Okay, it can be very dehumanizing, and you have to show that, okay, my identity brings value here too, where other people aren't seeing that. So that's more of the transactional, which you can kind of see and feel how that's problematic. The transformational changes that the whole feelings around this. So I've been looking at what does move people to act. Okay, so I've done many studies on this, and the business case either doesn't lead to much action at all, or it can lead to negative action, so counterproductive effects, where instead, really, there are a couple of things that do lead people to act. So when I say act, I mean things like bias, challenge bias systems, or actually extend opportunity to historically excluded talent. So when people are feeling like the diversity, equity, inclusion, whatever the initiative, the effort, when they feel it's the right thing to do, those are the people who are acting, and it's moving them to action, motivating them to action. They're really internalizing what those goals are and what the DEI is all about. Also, the people who act are those who are actually acknowledging systemic inequality. When you talk about the business case, that's really not much about any systemic inequality. It's not really acknowledging that there are barriers there. And it's not really about it being the right thing to do. It's about, it's really different. So that's the transactional and how it compares to the transformational that really kind of hits people in a different way, which is why I really like the thought of the storytelling and the feelings, and how the feelings can drive action in unique ways that we have not seen. So I feel like the DEI world has a lot to learn from the marketing world as well, in terms of how to approach these things and how to approach our workplace culture and our workplace practices as well. So I don't know. I think we didn't put it up.
We have a graphic. Yeah. So this is great. Because I think one of the things that is nice for us to think about is this is an expansion of the pie. It's an expansion of opportunity. It's a positioning of what's possible for the future, and that has people feel something, and that feeling is what motivates the action. I love what you shared, and I would love for more folks to invest in this and for marketers to really take this on. Jamila, quick follow-up question. Should people combine the transactional and transformational case?
I'm not a fan of the transactional. I was when I went into this research. I'm like, yes, there's a business case. It's clear, kind of like what Christina said. It's crystal clear, especially for marketing. Like, certain fields are like, look at all of this money that people are spending. Everyone has money to spend. There's like all of these different people you want to reach. Like, it doesn't make sense to not have diversity in those settings. So maybe there's an argument there, but then you get back to, okay, then you need the equity in some places, but not the others. And then are they actually meeting whatever that expectation is of what the work that identity is going to bring and all of that? So I guess I just see people pigeonholed. And then what if those accounts in those communities are the lower earning accounts, and then they're paid less? There are just so many other negative consequences that I've uncovered over the years of the business case, that yes, there is a clear business case, but I don't believe in selling that to defend and to justify why we need to be more inclusive and why we need to incorporate more talent from these historically excluded groups.
You heard that. Yep. Thank you so much, Jamila. And so, switching gears a little bit, let's talk about how marketers can start to bring these things into action. So now I'm going to come to John and Christina. So John, you talk about, what you need to do, what you need to bring to the advertising to have it land. And the best advertising takes inspiration and feedback from the communities that you're working with. But what are the things, any like top 3 tips for inclusive advertising, making sure people feel seen? And then Christina, I want to talk about brand stewardship with you.
Yeah, definitely. Well, listen, the first thing is you got to put the work in up front, right? And you got to put it in early. So this is not about waiting until you're doing the casting of your ad right down at the end of the process and going, who should we cast in that role? If you're going to tell an authentic story, you have to start with the community and the story and the people and really understand them. And again, leave your biases, leave your preconceptions at the door, and make sure you cast the net widely as well. So you really consult with the community that you're going to be talking to. There's a great example, actually. Starbucks did a wonderful ad about a transgender boy in the UK, and they did the advertising agency Iris did some very, very good research, spending a lot of time with people in that community, understanding their experience of going through transition, and that they used that as inspiration to tell a really powerful story that was very moving, and that was very, very effective. The second thing I'd say is, and sorry, this is a little plug for System 1, so sorry, Ty, to do this, but test your advertising, right? So you can test a script, you can test a storyboard, but go and test it out with the people that you're representing, and make sure you get the details right, because we as humans are very good at spotting inauthenticity, right? You can see it a mile off, and we all know that. We've all seen advertising when it's just not done quite well. And it's very obvious when someone hasn't done the research and hasn't kind of gone to the lengths to really understand how it is. So do go and test it. And if anyone wants help with that, obviously talk to me. We can help you. But anyway, plug over. And then the final thing is, it's really important that you do have diverse teams working on it, right? And that's your media agency, your advertising agency, your research agency, if you're working with someone like us. But make sure you involve people in the process of making advertising in front of the screen, as well as behind this, so in both sides of the screen as well. So the creatives that are writing the stories, the art workers that are doing the treatment, because there are so many details. It's interesting, actually, when you see the backlashes happen, it's the details that cause that. Do you know what I mean? It's the details that people go, that wouldn't happen like that, or that's not my culture, or that isn't how this thing works out. So that's why it's important to get those details right. So, and as I say, have a read of this as well if you want to. You want some inspiration.
It's all good, John. You can do all the plugs. It's all good. It's all good.
Can I say something really quickly?
Sure.
I just really, because I know you want to have another question, but this is brilliant how you put this together, because there's so much synergy here that I just, we haven't really connected up what this messaging is, testing this messaging, testing these approaches, and how it carries over these different domains and contexts, but it's the exact same thing. So I study workplace training, same thing, do more training, everyone do training. Are they testing it? No. Are they even thinking about what type of training, what messaging, any of that? No. So the same thing, having more empirically informed approaches to what we're saying, how we're saying it, what we're doing. And because you can't expect the positive outcomes if you just put junk in, junk out, right? So the same thing in that context as what you're seeing in the marketing and advertising space. So sorry, I just had to put that in there.
No, please. No, I hear you, junk in, junk out. And we'll get to the questions in just a moment. We have 2 more areas where I think it would be really great for us to touch on. And so Christina, I come to you with brand stewardship. So we've talked about the opportunity. We've talked about how marketers can lean in and support this cause. There's an opportunity for us to be involved across all of the areas of brand, consumer, corporate, talent, with DEI across all of that. So what we found, and we've seen this, that marketers are not really seeing themselves as the function responsible for DEI. Marketers, if you look at this graphic here, marketers are not even on this list. So Christina, what role do you think we should start to play when it comes to making progress, and what has brand stewardship looked like for you in this age?
I have been, first of all, I apologize. My dog won't ever let me be great. He's photobombing everything I do. So
he's really cute though. I saw him.
Second, I have been having to mute myself because I'm just like everything that Jamila and John are saying. I'm like, yes. So thank you for putting together this incredible conversation. I think we need more space to have like a 360-degree conversation. And so we knew this was going to happen, Jamila, but now I have to tap into what Jamila and John said. Don't teach the language of equality if you don't provide the tools and context with which to back it up. Don't hire for diversity thought if you're going to pigeonhole people and put them in a box and not listen to what they have to say, which is why, making sure that your leadership is also inclusive means that, you eliminate that I'm colorblind. I will not cuss on this, because we do see color and we should be celebrating our differences. And that's why it is important to have a diverse panel. We hear Shirley Chisholm, she talks about, if I don't have a seat, I'm pulling up a folding chair. And I say today she would not be happy with the folding chair. I'm not interested in sitting at any table where I don't have a full seat. And I intend, and I am intentional with pulling up seats for other people, because the more people at the table, I think people worry about, losing power. I believe that the more people who have a seat at the table, the more opportunity you create, so much opportunity that you are able to create more tables. And that comes from a mindset of abundance versus a mindset of lack. And I think that lack is a direct result of so many of the things that Jamila brought up earlier, but let's change that narrative. So let's be intentional in the things that we do. Why is that important? I see that and I'm like, how does a marketer market and go, yeah, but that's not my job, marketing to every audience? Well, here's some stats, because I love some stats from Diversio. 73% of people will stop purchasing from a business that doesn't share their view on DEI. 72% of employees leave a company for a more inclusive one. And our lovely millennials, 76% of millennials conduct follow-up research to see whether a business's DEI promise is backed by action. I don't think I really have to say much more on that. I mean, there's the hire with intention, tell stories with intention, measure your story, and listen. What John said is like, listen, I'm a marketer, I'm a content creator. I love making things, but am I making things that are relevant to other people? I'm not making things to be like spoken word, snap, snap. I'm still running a business. I need to make sure that I'm making culturally relevant content that connects with the audience with which I am trying to engage. In this case, we want to engage with the broadest audience possible, but within that means you need to also be intentional in your storytelling. So that was my biggest soapbox. I will dismount fully off of it and once again say thank you, Ty, for creating space. And I have thoroughly enjoyed having this conversation with Jamila and John. It's been an honor.
Thank you. And I want to underline, put like a bright light on abundance, mindset of abundance. We can create more tables, because I think a lot of the biases are rooted in thinking that there's not enough to go around, but there's an opportunity for us to create more. So last question to both John and then Christina, maybe like one sentence of advice, and then we're going to do rapid fire on these questions. So businesses and people often say, I can't really start this work until I have my house in order, or we're not perfect yet. So we shouldn't really engage in this conversation until we fix all the things. John, like a sentence or two on, should people dive in or avoid? Do you need to have meaningful work before you get started? Any tips?
Oh, right. Super quick. I'm going to tie back to what Christina said earlier about storytelling and the importance of storytelling. I think that's really key. There are two extremes, I think, based on our research, to avoid. One is tokenistic effort. Tokenism can be spotted a mile away, right? Don't be tokenistic. If you're going to do it, be authentic, right? That's super important. On the other side, if you're going to go into the struggle, or the issue, you need to be well prepared and need to be following up. And that's also important. But the middle ground, the bit that really works well, is think about how you tell compelling stories and uplift, unite and inspire. Because what our research suggests is if you do that, you bring people with you and you're more likely to be successful.
Great. Christina, any words of advice from folks who may say, we don't have our things together? How do we have a conversation about this?
I have a problem with cancel culture, because cancel culture has created a space where people are afraid to say anything in the fear of saying the wrong thing. So to that, I would say everyone's on a journey. And why would we stop someone if they want to get on a journey to do better? But don't do it if it's just for the business case, to Jamila's point. If your intent is correct, if you do want to make change and change the way that you show up and market, the makeup of your company, the change that you can drive in your community, like, let's create space for people to embark on the journey. No one is I'm not perfect. But you have to do something. You have to like double dutch, get in there, drive some change, and then sit back and see the results. I guarantee if you do, I have to end with my pithy remark that I always say. And it is the worst thing that you can do right now is to do nothing. Do something. Just do something.
Do something. Take an action. Yes. Okay. So now we're going to answer questions in a rapid fire way. Let's get to some questions. So Robin asks, how do we find and convince other Black, Latino, and minority representatives to jump on board with us? So anyone want to take on that question? Or I can get us started if no one wants to jump on that real quick.
Why only the Black, Latino, and other minority representatives is my question. Why not the white men and the other people? This is everyone's work and everyone's journey. I think that's the point of making this a human issue that connects us all and connects us in purpose. It can't just be the people who are the most marginalized and the most vulnerable in the space taking on all of this work. So I would say do aim to strive to get to broaden who's involved in it, but I wouldn't limit it to the people on that list.
I agree with what Jamila just said. I was like finding the right words. I noticed on like one of our posts, someone was like, John's on a panel talking about diversity. I'm like, yes. And yes,
absolutely.
Because he has like a critical information that he's bringing to this conversation to underscore what Jamila said. We cannot solve these problems by ourselves in any one sector. The only way forward is together. We need to create a space where it's comfortable for everyone to have the conversation.
Great. Thank you. And so someone's asking, where can we find the Leading Through Change discussion? We'll get that link for you in the chat, I believe.
I dropped it in the post chat, so we can drop it in.
So we'll grab that and pop it in there for you, Erica.
Can I ask one question that I saw, because I always break the rules.
Please, go for it. Go for it.
Someone asked, hold on, let me see, who was it? She said, what can marginalized talent do to be found easier in marketing industry, and where should we network, et cetera? I think that one of the critical things to remember for leaders that are on this call, or if you have a platform on this call, you should also be intentional in rising up talent that need to be seen. I have no problem sharing a spotlight or a platform. That's to me the difference between mentorship and sponsorship, which is a whole other conversation. But find a sponsor also, in addition to, I'm an introvert, so networking is hard for me. But what I can do is make sure that when there's incredible talent, that you use your platforms to make sure that they're seen.
Great.
That's part of the action we're talking about with the knowledge action gap. Help people, lift people up, bring that seat to the table, take them to see that client, expose them, develop them, all of those things. Yep. So it shouldn't be only on the marginalized talent trying to be found. We should all be looking for them as well. Okay.
Great. Yes. Claps, exactly. All right. So any examples of people that are rocking brand stewardship, any companies? This might be a case of really digging into the report that John has shared to find some great examples there.
Yeah, 100%. Listen, two doing it really well are Nike and Adidas. I don't know what it is about sporting goods, but they really do walk the walk very well and are doing some great work. And on this side of the pond, actually, Tesco and Boots in particular in the UK are doing the everyday authentic diversity incredibly well. So you don't necessarily have to have high-paid superstars in your advertising, but actually doing authentic everyday diversity is resonating so strongly with audiences and getting incredible results. So don't just look at the highly paid superstars, look at the people that are doing the everyday. And Ty, I must say this, I'm sorry to embarrass you, LinkedIn are acing it as well. And she's not paying me to say that. I have the data, but you very kindly use us to test some of your own advertising. And you are doing great work in this space. So I know you can't say that, but I'll say it for you. So do check out the LinkedIn Zone advertising.
Yeah, thank you so much, John. I'll do a shameless plug here and there myself as well. But I wish we had more time. So we have to wrap up. but I just want to thank our speakers, including Jamila. As of a tech glitch, we lost her on the broadcast, but thank you, Jamila. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, John, for all the wealth, all the gems that you brought to this conversation. I want to thank our audience for tuning in and investing your time today in this very important topic. If you want to learn more, I think I speak for everyone when I say feel free to connect with any of the speakers here. You can follow the B2B Institute. We've dropped some resources into the chat, some things for you to check out. And then definitely tune in for our next Live with Marketers on November 18, which will be the new 2021 Edelman Thought Leadership Impact Study. So a conversation on that you don't want to miss. So with that, thank you so much, everyone. And we'll see you at the next Live with Marketers.